stopping place if you can. And what we're gonna do next is, you're gonna get with your group and you're gonna get your chart paper and you're gonna dialogue a little bit about what it is that you have written down on your sticky notes, what stood out to you as being most important. I know one group kind of divided and conquered, which is interesting, so each one's gonna be an expert on something that they've made notes on. Others of you did the whole article, which is great because then you've got a whole kind of scope of the article to discuss with each other. So let's go ahead and chat with each other and see if you can categorize these things. Write it on your chart paper. You can take notes, you can use different colors, whatever you want. And then hopefully we'll be able to have some time to dialogue about the process and what you were able to glean from it. So I'll give you about 5 minutes to arrange your stickies and have that dialogue with each other.
Does someone want to read it and then like everybody else is kind of listen and that's what we go with it? I was. Well, I like how we
Well,
that would be teaching. Good.
you have a.
I have this question about that, I was like, how can you really
Put him on here.
people who are very pretty colored? There you go.
Right.
Okay, mine is no students, what do we do with our time when we don't have students? And, oh, good one, eat, I like that, eat.
Have to pause on it, then the meeting and transfer.
Eat food.
Yeah, I remember that. And then to copy my line, I just realized I'm thinking.
Yeah. Oh my God, don't go there. Eat food. Well, we eat food, we're not eating our nails.
I know I saw that.
Terrible. I'm trying to take myself out of a hole right now, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, like, me, I just use the transfer.
Here, you want a pretty color? So I have to kind of give it when it says collaboration.
Yeah.
Like win food.
I had a big idea.
What do y'all going here?
You
can have one
big
big one, you could go
orange
to-
out of it. We should eat healthy. Making it orange, just an orange, eat healthy.
Question.
That's what we should do.
I'll put questions down for this.
But I had, well, I had transfer school to like,
There you go.
Do you want to be red? I already got it, those are red. Want me to write questions or?
textbook written in the being teacher.
Or put
I'm a real true.
grade 2 or whatever.
I would.
I don't know how to spell that, I'll be really embarrassed.
Oh, I
So
have,
this would actually go with your textbook things off. It's what not to do.
and students
I
realize.
wonder if he'll show. No, I really do. I really do. I don't even know why they're coming.
Students get questions
It's
wrong.
not
they go
requested.
Tried.
Wrong question.
Yeah, the analyzer something.
Great going. Is that spelled right? Yes. Except we have to do it upside down.
I know, I was just. If we have time.
We're gonna punctuate appropriately.
I need to say what you should about collaboration, okay.
Yeah, like, the analyzers themselves.
Teaching is
But
collaborative.
he's leaving supposedly.
This team is like teachers.
But I still have to test him today.
Integrating the goals of the school, the program.
But I still have to test him today. I hear he's not gonna.
Oh, I just took on here.
Uh-huh. No, but you saw, that's not, however, you don't know the other side. You saw that does not reflect well on
And how to
us.
compare
So
that.
we're going, I'm gonna, I'll see.
Does it reflect well when he marks it off?
We don't, we're not scored that way though.
I
As
think
a
so.
set.
clarify.
He's not, no, we're not, he is. He is.
But it reflects on the whole program, where it's somewhere with the
Questions are for.
Writing is based on research.
Confusing to answer
If
questions.
he doesn't
You know, a
want
lot
to
of this
cooperate,
stuff
go ahead.
is stuff from, Wiggins and McIntyre. You know, Wiggins and McIntyre. really good on backwards. So like, a lot of this in here, I don't know any of it.
She cited.
That's good.
Like, these are the ways new teachers.
I actually
It's exactly designed. This is our. I mean, this is $160 bill. The stuff that you put down, and all the stuff is us anyway. We're there anyway.
Measuring clauses.
This guy's talking about skipping chapter.
I can read you that
We're not
code.
really skipping chapter. And even though this is in the cover of content, you know, teachers have cover the content and why, but you can't skip chapters. Like, you can't, not in math.
Not in math.
It's not, that's not, you guys, I could throw that.
Because
away.
it's
not, yes, because it is so,
sequential.
it is so sequential and it is so scaffolded together. But if I skip something, the next year, then I come saying, what'd y'all do last year?
Yeah.
What'd y'all do last year? So.
Yeah. Okay, one more minute.
And that, and they don't matter because,
This one's about questions, not ownership.
but it, you know, and
The
then
questions
about
seem
this
to
whole
go
article,
have
what I
everything
thought about it was
in for one.
I don't have to just the way the education
It was
is,
oh, this
you
was
know,
part
the,
of it
the
right
state
here.
standard
What
are,
about right here, like a different,
the way we are
different kind of
judged
content?
is changing in the next 2 years.
Different ways you get
Like
content, not
student
necessarily fact.
evaluations.
And
will
does
matter
anything else
to
go with that?
your end evaluation.
Well,
Parent evaluation, we get matter to our
That goes
years.
to
As all
yeah.
this stuff starts to change.
Results.
Teachers.
Results.
Take notes.
I don't have to
Taking
find
notes, put them on.
It's not gonna be.
I don't know about we talked about this is on here.
This is the most important part.
Did you get my message? I left it.
I haven't had a chance to look. This one I've been on. Okay, y'all about ready?
Almost.
That's okay. Let's go ahead. How would y'all like to do this? Do you want to present or do you want to just dialogue about it? How would you like to go about this? Just,
See what we agreed on?
see what you agreed on? Who wants to start? I know that, you want to go? Okay, great.
So we,
I have a similar role.
so our 4 different things, we kind of, first of all, we kind of just started sharing our sticky notes and then kind of seeing where they overlapped and putting them in different spaces, and then we came up with a heading later. And so one that we had was, the first one was about measuring success. Kind of, you know, about different ways of assessing in a way that directly reflects the goals. And you need to clarify the purpose of your content, not just covering the content, you know, saying, okay, we covered it, but clarifying the purpose of that. And then we also had the collaborative system. We had a lot about that part of the article, that it's not just you in your classroom alone, but it's across the hallway, it's across the school, and he even went so far as to say that it should be across the whole system too, about what is a K-12 system, and that was one of the questions that I personally had was, how do you really get a K-12 system to work the way that he says it is? You know, everyone from kindergarten through 12th grade planning together, grading together, just seems very unrealistic.
Highbrow,
honestly.
yes.
And then another section we had was about thinking big, that the purpose justifies the teaching. You want long-term accomplishments, again, about what you can cause, not about what you can do. And then our last section was about teacher practices, you know, that you yourself and your goals are independent of the textbook. You didn't write the textbook was made by somebody else. You should never just go page by page through it. Making those life connections for students. And one question that Beth had was, about life connections. When you're teaching those, can they become redundant and therefore ineffective for your students?
Like if they're hearing the same life connection over and over again, does it stop having value?
What do y'all think about that?
Tune it out.
That makes me think of like so many things, so many times when they're like, when am I ever gonna use this or something like that. I hear it now and I saying a lot of the same things over and over again, like, oh, well, this job maybe, and what if you did this? And they come up with the same ones because they've been trained, because we've given them so many of the same things over and over again that they automatically come up with the same ones, so.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Comments? Very good, excellent. Measuring success, collaboration, thinking big, teacher practices. Okay, great, thank y'all. What about you guys?
Sure you will. We kind of did the same thing, like just read, one of ours read all of her Post-its, and we just kind of read at ours while she was reading hers, and said, oh, mine fits with that. So we have purpose, collaboration, eagerness. Those of you who are not bilingual, that means questions. And a different kind of, this one was kind of hard, because this was kind of like our little random Pandora's box. But a lot of these have to do with like a different kind of content, and thinking about content as what you teach, not what the standards are. It's two very different things. Textbooks as a resource, not a source, what you guys are saying. And teaching more for understanding. There's something on page 22 that talked about the questions that students have wrong, and we tend to think, oh, they got that wrong because I need to reteach that, when usually it has to do with the transfer of learning, careful reading, non-routine problem solving, and critical thinking, not necessarily the actual fact in the textbook. Do you guys want to talk? Talking a lot.
You did a wonderful job, Haley.
Okay, I do have a question. When he's talking about fun, and he's like, why can school not be fun all the time? This is something that we've talked about a lot in school, and how people kind of think of fun as one thing, but really it's enjoyment in school, because not everything in school is meant to be fun, but the enjoyment part comes in when they're confident about something, and that's when we see that it's enjoyment. It's not necessarily they're having fun, like they would go have fun after school or something, so I think we kind of mix that up sometimes, yeah.
That's a really good point.
It's not the same thing.
And also, I've noticed like if they're doing a lab in science or something and they're having fun doing it, if someone walks in, it kind of makes you feel like, you know, they're misbehaving because they're having fun. Like they're laughing and they're getting along and they're doing what they're supposed to do, but at the same time, it could be looked at like they're not behaving. And so it kind of puts like the teacher in a position where you're like, well, should I make them be quiet all the time, or do I want them to discuss and laugh and get some enjoyment out of it? You know, like, you feel kind of torn.
Mm-hmm.
You
You
know?
shouldn't worry about like what people in the hall are thinking about what you're doing, but instead knowing like your kids are understanding what they're learning, what you're teaching them. I mean, if it involves them doing something fun and they get it and they're paying attention, then they have it. Not what it's so.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
honestly, truthfully, deep down, that's what I care about. But as a new teacher, you feel like all eyes are on you and you just want to do well. So I mean, that's just the way position I'm in. You know, if you've been here a while and you don't have that, you know, issue on your mind, that's kind of what's on my mind is, you know, I'll have people like you and Mr. Stark come in, and sometimes Dr. Track will come in, and just even another teacher walks in for something, and I don't want, it's like around here, it's like, you know, I don't want that reputation, oh, Ms. Garchow's class is fun all the time, because if they're having fun in there, they're not learning. It's kind of like,
Well, that's
Do you
what
know
I
what I'm
think
saying?
the responsibility of the teacher is to make sure that the students are engaged. And I like what, Ms. Janice said about, I like what you said about enjoying something because you're confident that, you know, in the learning that's taking place. And so as a teacher, it's my responsibility to go around and make sure that the students are engaged while they're enjoying and having fun, as opposed to talking on their cell phones and texting each other and, you know, things like that that sometimes I see in different classes. So, unless that's part of the lesson too, but I mean,
Yeah.
Miss McAneer has kids taking pictures using Cam Scanner I don't know if y'all are familiar with Cam Scanner, but it's a really cool piece of technology where you can download an app and you can do it on iPhones and on Android phones. But you can take pictures of handouts and things like that, and it's like it scans the picture and you can just slap it up on your blog like that. So it's really neat. And she has kids taking pictures and scanning things so they can take it home with them, and you know. So there's a difference, and you know, when you go into a classroom and everybody has their phone out, you're like, okay, what's going on in here? But it only takes a minute to figure out that they're engaged in some kind of activity. So that's a good point. That's a very good point. And I like what you said too about transfer, because I thought in the article he spoke a lot about transfer. And what that makes me think of is, you know, the idea that we don't know what jobs are going to even be out there and available to kids once they graduate.
Good morning. May I have your attention? Dr. Cohen, Ms. Grant, Ms. Edinburgh, Ms. Hines, Ms. Guibers. Please meet Ms. McCarthy in the testing room. Dr. Cohen, Ms. Grant, Ms. Edinburgh, Ms. Hines, Ms. Guibers. Please meet Ms. McCarthy in the testing room. Thank you.
So we really have to teach kids to think critically and to think divergently, because we don't even know what they're going to be doing in 10 years. We don't even know what the industries are going to be in 10 years anymore. So that's why I think the Common Core has come out, and that's why we are emphasizing that idea about metacognition and thinking about your thinking, and you know, really encouraging kids to think for themselves, because really they haven't done that for quite a while now. So that's good. What about you guys?
My section thought, well, I'll wait, but my section talked on what you
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Well, it's, in order to achieve that, just to fish out that, we have to change habits. And, you know, it talks about if transfer and meaning making are the goals, then, you know, lecturing becomes more inappropriate, and more things like Socratic seminar and, you know, what we learned with Jill Haas becomes more appropriate. But that requires changing our habits. That requires getting on the same page with our departments and whatnot, and not just talking about what we're gonna cover, but how we're gonna cover it, what we want the students to be able to know and do, rather than just, okay, for the next 2 weeks, we're doing this, you know, we're covering these standards. So.
Right.
And it mentions that distress in teaching comes with lack of clarity about, you know, how can we get on the same page? There's that balance between what I'm doing alone in the classroom just to try to get by, and then what's coming down from, you know, the department or the county, and teachers get frustrated because they sometimes they just don't know, because it's like, well, everybody's kind of here and there. So common rubrics and all that are great, but it's just takes time to develop it was like what you guys were talking about earlier, the difference between what we can achieve realistically on a system-wide level versus what we can do individually. You know, we have.
Good morning, teachers. Mr. Kitzler and Ms. Dickerson, if you could call extension 266 for just a minute, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
I need you to stop talking.
Okay.
All right. To cover the content, kind of piggybacks right into that. Teach for understanding, not answers. They, you know, and I think that is a real problem that teachers say we can't do anything because of the standards. You know, like we act like we're sometimes strapped for time to teach, and I know we are. But again, and like in math, we were taught in college, if you teach for deeper understanding, the standardized questions fall into place. And I think this also, the transfer of knowledge, goes like you were saying, right over to our IY discussion the other day. And the teachers must, you know, we have to break that mold. And we can't break it for the county or the state, but we can change Griffin. We can change what goes on in this building. And then let the pieces fall where they may. And hopefully, you know, I don't have that fear of what anybody thinks when they come to my classroom. When I want my kids to be quiet, they're quiet. When I want my kids to be up and engaged, they're up and engaged. There's times for everything. And I think everybody needs to be able to do that and be able to, you know, when you come in and I'm playing, you know, a rap song, I don't ask questions. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the one that wrote that lesson. I think you're behind me. That's what I expect from everybody. That's what I think everybody in the building should come to expect from administration, and what administration should give, and probably does give to everybody in the building. Don't be nervous, just teach. Just teach.
It's easy to say, hard to
Put it down and
do.
teach.
But yeah, I mean, I love this article because I've been trying to do a lot of this stuff, and it didn't really occur to me that I was trying to do that until I read this article. Like for instance, when I'm teaching my math class, if they're getting the problem wrong, sometimes I'll still mark it right if they did it correctly. Like if they did the process of finding that answer correctly, then I will say, okay, you get it. You may have missed a decimal point or, or whatever, but you get it. And that's kind of the way I'm trying to look at science. It's a little harder with the science to do that than it is with the math because it's so much content. I mean, there's a lot of words they don't know, there's a lot of concepts they don't know, and they have to imagine an atom. They have to imagine, these things because you can't necessarily look at them all the time. And that's why, I'm using a lot of media and things like that, but I feel that, just looking at some of the benchmark questions yesterday, I was thinking, if they read the instructions and understand how, all the rest will come back to them. But I think I've noticed with a lot of my students, they're skipping the instructions and just trying to get the answer. And I'm like, I'm always saying, read the instructions, understand the instructions, and then you'll do better. And I don't think they realize how important that is, to do that.
Yeah. Well, if we could, I know we're pressed for time. What I'd like to do, just to close, is have you come up with your idea, like one big idea that you got out of the article, like collaboration or transfer. So let's just go around the room and see, for you, and you can repeat if you need to, but see if we can come up with some different ideas. One big idea that you benefited from the article.
Focus on the skills, teach how to transfer the skills.
Okay, good.
Your kids might appreciate this, but we're gonna try and use our textbook less in our science class.
Good.
Learning transfer as well, transferring to real life, to bigger goals outside of just your classroom.
Excellent.
I would think purpose and like kind of a bigger world view of like what the point of school is.
That's good.
We all know this, that students, the things they get wrong have nothing to do with the facts, it's just their transfer, their understanding, their critical thinking.
I think based off what I do, we transferring to real life.
Okay, good.
Mine's purpose, that purpose-driven learning. What is the reason that I'm here? What are the reasons my students are here?
Okay.
That's a big thing.
That's good.
I think I'm going to focus on trying to get them to understand, like you said, the purpose of school and not just necessarily learning facts, but learning why they need to exercise their brain and get better overall.
Okay. One word, David.
One word?
We're just, well, yeah.
What can we achieve realistically on a system-wide level versus the creative control the teacher needs to have in terms of the unique needs of their
That
students?
was 21 words.
Fast counter.
I have to do it.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Coley?
I guess transfer, but I think mine is transfer more within mathematics. Because if you don't understand, I try to teach kids at the beginning of the year how important it is to understand negative numbers. Because if you don't understand negative numbers, then equations is going to be a lot more difficult. And if you can't do equations, then right now we're doing geometry and adding up two angles to make a supplementary pair. And then they change it to where there's two equations. So they have to add two equations and it equal 180 degrees. And they don't understand the transfer of what we did in Unit 2 and 2.5. So it is that kind of direct transfer in mathematics that is so important.
Good. Mr. White?
I look at the overall things that we try to teach them every day. And one of the things that Dr. Track has talked about is the integration of all the classes together and how they build upon one another. And when you talk about transfer, to me, it's transferring that math to science, science to social studies, across all of them, and looking at the big picture of how that's gonna make them an effective worker, an effective citizen, and all that.
Good. Well, I hope y'all found this article beneficial. I thought it was pretty amazing, and I thank you for coming. Yes, ma'am?
I was watching Oprah's life class the other day, did anyone see it? Hey, this is important, don't believe it. His name was Pastor Rick Warren, and he talked about, determining your purpose in life and your purpose in work and all that. You guys should Google it or read it or Oprah.com it.
Thank you. I love Oprah. All right, if y'all need sticky notes, take them, and if you need markers, take them.
Hey, don't threaten me with markers.
Merry Christmas. If you need another cinnamon roll, take one.
I called the marker today.
Do you want us to, what do you want to do with these? Do you want to keep them?
Keep them.
Those are great.
I think you guys will have to use this. I do too. I thought that was a cool thing. Thank you.
Marcus, man, that's hard to come with. I don't play about markers.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
My wife gave me a total of her used pre-K markers. You can imagine what condition they. Thank you, Ms. Depaul.
Thank y'all. Thanks for
I
coming.
appreciate it.
It took me an hour to get from my house in Woodstock. I live on 65
So,
to Piedmont Road in
I have a
Kansas.
friend that lives in Woodstock, and she's always asking me to come over, and I'm like, you might as well live in Kentucky. I mean, you are so far away.
It's not bad. Like once I got into Cobb County, it was normal. But
Yeah.
like just getting to Cobb County was
Did you sign in?
ridiculous. No, I didn't. Should I? Since I was so late, I
Yes,
feel like I
you
missed
should.
everything.
I love my husband.
I don't want to sound like I'm like complaining, but like I kind of do feel like if I let the kids have too much fun, I would get in trouble. You know what I mean?
Well, it's just making sure that there's a purpose behind your fun.
And that's what my goal is, but you know, they still tend to get too loud even when they're doing that, and then my neighbor teacher will come in and say, okay, they're being too loud, and I, you know, they
Yeah.
calm down, we can have fun, but don't yell.
Yeah.
Yell.
Yeah.
Even if it's something, you know, content related.
Uh-huh. Thanks, Rhonda.